Equal education is a social movement with a mass membership base primarily of students in township and rural areas and their parents. And our organization campaigns for improved conditions in those schools, as well as for greater equality within the education system. And we do that through mass mobilization, through the use of media, the use of law, advocacy, political lobbying, all of the means at our disposal due to the Constitution and the dispensation which we have. The Western Cape Education Department has stated their intention to close 27 schools in the province. The reasons that they have cited for the intended closure include dwindling learner numbers, poor academic performance, as well as in at least one case where the majority of the learners come from outside of the community in which the school is located. Most of the schools are located in the rural Western Cape, and so the reason around dwindling learner numbers is also coupled with the fact that at some of those schools there are classrooms in which there are more than one grade which are being taught. So those are basically the reasons which they have articulated. Equal Education's position is that there are instances when closing schools are legitimate, but that this needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and that, you know, for example, when due to changing settlement patterns and urbanization, we know that a lot of people who previously lived on farms are now living in cities, and who previously lived in rural areas are also now living in the cities. And so that will mean that the provision of schooling and the location of schools is something which may have to be changed. But even in those instances, we believe that there has to be a proper process of community consultation, and the learner's interests, the individual learner interests, has to be taken into consideration. So whether the closing of a school will make it harder for children to access schooling and will possibly even infringe on their right to a basic education under the Constitution, then we feel that it shouldn't go ahead. We also are not in favor of schools being closed due to underperformance, which has been cited in a few of the cases by the Western Cape Education Department. We do not feel that closing schools is an appropriate and correct way of dealing with the challenges we face of underperformance, particularly in township and rural areas in our schools. And what we need to be doing instead is having, holistic interventions to address the issues that are causing schools to underperform. So whether that's the issue of school management, teacher training, whether those are issues around language policy, around broader community issues, we should rather be dealing with that than closing schools. There are instances when the Provincial Education Department has to close the school, okay? But where those instances do arise, okay, the reasons for the closure have to be clearly articulated, okay, and it has to be uniform, okay? So if you're talking about the fact that there are dwindling learner numbers, there has to be a uniform standard when we're talking about dwindling learner numbers, where we say that, okay, below that certain number, schools should be considered for closure, okay? But also that where decisions are being considered, it should be key to that deliberation should be the interests of the learners, and whether by closing the school, okay, you would make it harder for children to access schooling. Okay, so if you're in a small rural community and you're closing the local school, okay, is it possible for those learners? Is the department taking measures for those learners to be transported to other schools? And also the schools that they are being transported to, okay, are those schools adequate? Will they receive an education which is equal in quality at least to the education which they received before? Earlier this year, the Western Cape Education Department sent a letter to the 27 schools stating that they were considering closing the schools and also citing the reasons why in each individual case they were thinking about closing the school. Okay. They then, in that same letter, they gave the opportunity for the school governing bodies of those schools to make a presentation, okay, either or both a written and oral presentation to the education department in response to that letter. Okay, so then schools or SGB submitted, they made both written and oral submissions, okay, and saying whether they were in agreement or whether they were not in agreement with the WCD's intention to close the school. Okay, then that feedback, okay, those representations were considered by the MEC Donald Grant, okay, and he then had to decide whether to go ahead with the planned closure or to continue along that process, or whether he wanted to slow down or stop or not proceed with some schools. But he has in fact responded and said that he plans to go ahead to the next stage with all 27 schools, which is basically community consultation. So there have been and there will be, I think throughout the month of August, there will be opportunities for community members and parents for them to give their input at each individual school, to give their view to the department as to whether the school should be open. Equal Education was contacted by a few of the schools who received letters from the MEC stating that he intended to close them. And two schools in particular, Peakview Secondary School in Bridgetown in Athlone and Zonnebloem Nest in Zonnebloem in Central Cape Town, you know, they contacted us, and basically the school management, the parents, the SGB are not in favor of the schools closing. In the case of Peakview, the department intends to close the school because they they cite poor academic performance, as well as the fact that a majority of learners come from outside the school community. Okay, and the school is, they recognize that they have not performed well, but they feel that as though they are improving their performance, and what they need is not to be closed, but they need more support from the department. And they also take issue with the fact that most of the children actually come from outside of the school community is actually being cited as a reason for why the school could be closed. In Zonnebloem High School, Zonnebloem Nest, the reasons being articulated is that there is also that there's a poor academic performance and a high dropout rate. And the school is actually saying that their matric pass rate last year was 85%. And so why are they being cited for underperformance? And also their dropout rates are not worse than many of the other schools in the Western Cape. So why are they being cited now for closure? So these two schools in particular, they contacted us and asked whether we could possibly help. And we visited those schools, and we also made contact with other schools, because one thing which we also did was, as soon as this became sort of news that there were 27 schools, we we actually wrote to the MEC and we asked for a meeting basically to discuss and to find out more information about what was actually happening. Okay, so we made a request for a meeting and that request was turned down. We also asked for information regarding the schools which have been closed. Initially we asked for the names and those names weren't given to us. And we've also asked for what have been the department's interventions up until now with these schools that they intend to close, and what has been the correspondence between the department and schools. And that has also been denied, and we've now had to submit a PIA application to the department, which they have also denied. So, you know, we ourselves, we have been trying to find out information from the public, from the department as to what exactly is happening, what is the process, why are these reasons, and the department doesn't want to basically give us information regarding their intentions, and they are saying that it will compromise the process to do so. And we totally disagree with that. We feel that even at this stage now of community consultation, we feel that to effectively monitor that process, we need to know what has happened up until now and what the department has done and what they have been in contact with the schools, etc. about.